Welcome everyone to PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. My name is Guy Dawson, and I am the managing member of Classy Communications, a full-service public relations and marketing company. And this is a broadcast that I did not necessarily plan to have to give, or that I really want to have to give. But the realities of the situation in our country right now, I felt a strong urge to present this broadcast. For many of those who know me, I've been on the air for about 9 years as a broadcaster, and generally the types of topics that I talk about are related to business, to personal development, and to topics much different than what we're going to be talking about today. But again, all human beings have varied sides, and me being a person in the media, when I see something that I think is so out of alignment with what God wants for his creatures on this planet, I felt compelled as a journalist, as a businessman, and as a Black man to present some views about police brutality that I think should be presented to the public today. And so again, for those of you who are used to seeing me in a different light, I hope you won't look at me any differently as a result of what I'm going to share with you today. But the truth has to be told. And I have a good friend of mine named Nissa Tzun, who has been so involved in promoting the dehumanization of Black men, really, and Black people in general through police brutality for many years. She's appeared on other shows that I have conducted in the past, and I reached out to her a few days ago as a result of all of these things that are happening across the country, as a result of George Floyd's killing out in Minneapolis a few days ago. And I said, Nissa, I've just got to have you come on to speak to an issue that I know that you know a lot about, and something that I am deeply concerned about as a person, and again as a Black man in this country, experiencing police brutality, maybe not in the physical sense, but in other things that I'll talk about later as we go on in this broadcast. So thank you so much, Nissa, for being willing to participate today. We also have the families of victims of police brutality, and they're going to be telling their stories about the impact that police brutality, the violence of police brutality, has on the families that are left behind as a result of this violence. And so again, Nissa, thank you so much for being a part of the PR Connections radio show. For 1 hour, we are going to talk about this topic openly and honestly with Nissa and her boyfriend and partner,
husband and co-founder of the Force Trajectory Project.
And even introduce yourself to the audience.
My name is Vincent. I'm the co-creator, co-founder of the Force Trajectory Project with Nissa Tzun.
So wonderful to have both of you on today. And so let's start off with, there's so many places that we could start. I want to start with what motivated the two of you to get involved in efforts towards addressing the issue of police brutality in minority communities. Let's start there.
Sure. Is it okay if I just want to introduce our family members so that that's out in the open? We have Mario Wilson, who is the son of Rex Wilson, who was killed on October 13th, 2016, and Rex's wife, Petra Wilson. We're going to have to put up a photo of Rex Wilson and hold him up. This is a Native American family who has been impacted by not only structural racism, but police homicide, which is what the topic is today. So I just wanted to introduce them. And yeah, so in response to your question, and thank you for asking, the project actually brought me and Oja together. I've not been directly impacted by police violence. I mean, I have had instances with police, but not to the degree that what we're talking about today. And The reason why I got involved was because I was a special needs teacher back in 2006 in Brooklyn public schools, and I noticed very blatantly the systemic racism, um, the school to prison pipeline that starts literally once Black and brown and other people of color are going to school, right at that kindergarten level, you know, pre-K, et cetera. They're already labeling these kids immediately if they act, basically, if they act non-white, you know. So experiencing that made me really want to be involved in anti-racism work and in the community. And so once I got involved, I met a family out in Long Island. The victim's name is Kenny Lazo. He this was a very brutal case of police violence by the Suffolk County Police Department. And meeting the family made me think about, especially when they told their side of the story. And I ended up Googling the story and finding local papers and how they presented the story. And it was totally opposite, completely, you know, didn't match the family's perspective at all. And so I started being curious about the topic. Like, is this something that is a pattern? Does this happen on a regular basis? Why is the media constructing narratives of police violence in this dismissive way? And, you know, come to find out later that, yeah, this is a pattern and this happens regularly. The media is basically regurgitating what police officers are saying in the police department and officials. So I started the project first as a photography project because I wanted to put a lens on the families and the impact that this kind of violence has on their family. And then in the process of that, a mutual friend of me and Oja put us together because he was also doing this work in a different form. So I'll let him explain how he got to this work.
Thanks. I'm going to try to be brief here. Long story short, 2005, I was at getting ready to attend my first day of class. I had been at the New York University before studying music business, but I changed course study and was at the New School for Social Research in Manhattan in media studies. My first day of class on a class called Media and Race Relations, and I got a call from my ex-girlfriend saying that one of my best friends on the planet had been killed by the police in St. Louis, Missouri. And I checked the Post-Dispatch. Mind you, this is my first day of class at Media and Race Relations. And the story was outlandish. It was basically said that he tried to carjack a police officer with his child and his wife in the car. And that was the first story. And there was 3 stories that came out. And basically, this individual, my friend Cat, his name was Cornelius Cat Davis, was an MC, you know, and I'm a DJ by trade, by craft, by art, it's sound. And I started as a DJ, and music saved my life. You know, it saved his life too. Kept us out of trouble as kids, kept us focused. It educated me. You know, I learned a lot from music, and I would go and search and look up and read the books that people would refer to. So music was really a thing. I know for a fact that my friend wasn't involved in the street stuff because we had plenty of opportunity to do that. We just didn't have any time because we were busy trying to, you know, do our thing. So I knew it was a lie. I was really messed up about it for at least 2 weeks. I didn't sleep, you know, all the things family members talk about. And we've got 2 family members right here to explore that with. But all of the regular PTSD or continuous trauma syndrome stuff that you know exists, I was going through, and I got a spiritual message from my friend from the other side, which was, you know, don't kill yourself over this. I'm already gone, you know, but in his honor, I felt like I had to do something with the skills that I already had. Now, at the time, I was working on a project called Housing as a Human Right. So that's what we call now oral history, but I've always been recording stories and sound. So I decided to turn the efforts and the methodology towards connecting the public with the direct stories of family members and just stepping out of the way, right? Meanwhile, I found out through a friend about a existing collective of artists that was focusing on taking our art skills and supplying the journalism that the society doesn't. So basically citizen guerrilla journalism. And that's called the Alliance of Conscious Documentarians, ACD, which today exists as ACD Media. right? Our company. So basically, Force Trajectory Project was a project of the Alliance of Conscious Documentarians. And like Nissa said, I was already doing the work, doing the audio part, and she was taking these movement photos and had connected with a family member already. So we decided to get together and begin what you know now as the Force Trajectory Project. That's the story.
And so obviously this whole thing has evolved over time. The mission has grown larger. And I know, having interviewed the two of you in other environments, other shows that I've done, that this has become a passion of yours. And again, families, I'm going to get to you in a second. I just want to set this up a little bit because of my understanding of what the two of you have done. That is what inspired me to reach out to you to get some answers, to get a feel, because of how much I respect the both of you, the commitment that you've had in the community, talking about this topic, talking about the documentation of it, that I want to let you know that the impact that you have been having, because when I got inspired to make some kind of move here and talk to someone, I came to the two of you because of what you've done, because I know you guys have been in the trenches at a lot of levels for many years in doing this. So my next question is to you. I know it's not a surprise to you that this has happened again, because you've been talking about it for a long time. My question to you is, did you ever think that one of these situations would escalate to this extent as this one has? It seems to have gone far and above all the other ones. And I was a young man during Rodney King, and this seems to have trumped all of that. Did you ever envision this happening?
Most definitely. Most definitely envision this happening. There's only so much that people could take, you know. And when we reach a circumstance right now where what this is actually about is people's being fed up with the lies and the hypocrisy that have existed since the foundation of this country, right? There's something that exists which is called the ostrich effect, and it is what it sounds like. A bunch of people think that because you put your head in a hole and you don't see what's happening, that it's actually not happening. And that's a problem, right? So folks that have experienced this directly or have friends who have died, like myself, are a little bit, you know, like I'm a little bit closer to the center. You could think of it like the universe and the sun in terms of experience. It's like, I may not be the third planet, but I'm the fifth planet. You understand what I'm saying? So I understand on a certain level, but these family members, there's a special intentional community that exists that they form with each other, a level of support, a level of, and they'll tell you all about it, a level of camaraderie and guidance and skill sharing and family that is created, heart family that's created, that has the greatest power in our society. And this is the same energy that caused revolutions all over the Western Hemisphere, all over the world. So when we think about stuff like the Haitian Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, Simon Bolivar freeing all the nations in South America, the indigenous uprisings of our ancestors as they resisted against what became these United States, it's the same energy and the same resonance, the frequency of being fed up, because what's being violated is human rights. And Malcolm X really, to me, said it best, is that if we fight for civil rights, we're still fighting for something that is under the jurisdiction of the same oppressive forces that instilled, you know, that allowed us to get those civil rights. But if we fight for human rights, there's no taking that away, because that's not under the jurisdiction of a particular flag or any particular nation. That belongs to all human beings. So I think at this point, something that we've been functioning off of for a very long time, and that we know that family members function off of, again, they'll tell you about it all themselves, is the fact that this is a human rights struggle. We're talking about human beings and the right to be able to breathe, right? That I can't breathe thing is really apt, because you have a situation where the establishment has been removing the air, so to speak, this essential resource from communities, you know, first indigenous communities, and then African communities, and then every immigrant community that came in that didn't show up as so-called white, this construct, you know, that was made to distract from classism in the capitalist system, and slowly strangling different populations. You know, we can easily say that although in our analysis, although we know that there's a lot of power that exists in the Native community, these tactics that have been used on the Native community first have shown that it's possible to divide and squeeze a lot of life out of a culture. Next, the African culture. When we look at what we call ghettos, which is derived from Nazi Germany, that's a step right before concentration camps. And we can argue that reservations resemble concentration camps, okay? So we're looking at the same trajectory, and that's what we call the canary effect. What happens to indigenous people will eventually happen to every population of people, right? So now we're getting dangerously close as white people are getting caught in this net that was set for indigenous people, which has been catching so many African people, which are also indigenous people, right? We know that African people are the first people from the continent of Africa and then spread out all over. We know this anthropologically. So even the division between African and indigenous is kind of asinine. This is all social construction. We understand that. We understand the universal human rights, and we understand that that's what's been violated. But we think that, at least for myself, what we're observing right now, this tipping point, is about, wider society beginning to realize that. And these young kids, understanding the same lie that African and indigenous people have been hearing for the last 500, 600 years. Telling us that this is a democratic country, telling us that we have rights, telling us that we have liberty in these lands. That's all lies. And even the white kids that are out there fighting right now, they want to disconnect themselves from that heritage that hasn't been reconciled with. So I think that culmination of circumstances has brought us to this point.
And what I've seen that's so interesting, and you were right on point with so much that you were talking about a second ago, OJ. Here's the thing. Back in 1992, I'm from Long Beach, California. And so I saw intense riots at that time. But the big difference is something that you mentioned a second ago, and it's the way that it's crossing these cultural lines. And it made me take a look at how much different the world is 28 years after that. That there is so much bigger of a picture. By the way, when we talk about violence and armed revolt, this country was built on violence and armed revolt. That's my challenge with people who are, when they say things like, why are they destroying property? Why would they be doing this? This country, the colonies did this against the British back in the 1700s. It's in our DNA as a country.
What you point out right now. Yeah, right. Like the differentiation we can make right there, just to be clear, is getting confused about what capitalism is, right? Capitalism is about devaluing the worker and valuing the product, right? Making the worker invisible. So the perfect example is right now during COVID, we're talking about essential workers. In reality, what people in the double speak of today, what people are talking about as essential workers to the ruling class, so to speak, the billionaires, are actually the most expendable, right? So we say essential, but these folks are actually expendable. And where do most of these folks, what communities do most of these come from? They come from communities that come from Latinx communities, they come from Native communities, they come from immigrant communities. So the differentiation has to be made. It's a surprise to a lot of people that capitalism can be this insidious, but they haven't been looking at the Nike factories in China, and looking at the Disney factories in Haiti. They haven't been looking at the coltan mines in the Congo, but we've always looked at that. We've always understood this. So this is really just people catch up. And it's not about us trying to be hierarchical in terms of what we know, what we don't know, and experience. This is a teaching moment, and it's a learning moment, and it's a moment for us all to be humble. On that note, that humility involves letting the front line, air the message out. And so that's really our main message, is that we, folks need to know to fall back and let the families be the front line. That's what it's really about, because there's a big learning curve. We can't cover all that right now, but what we can do is encourage people to get behind the families who are the real leaders of this movement, right? Because they go to sleep with this every night, and they wake up with it every morning. They don't have the choice. It doesn't matter what kind of skin I'm in, how, and I don't want to minimize the racism and the target on the back of every African person. We need to understand the historical foundation of that and why that is so. And then solidarity will be more possible, but we can't cover all that right now. What we can cover is trying to lift up our family members, give them the platform. I don't mean to say lift up. They don't need any lifting up, really. I mean, they're lifting up the community. So they're the real leaders. They're dealing with this. And the thing that people get twisted a lot is they try to say their family members are victims. But the fact is, every Maroon society that conducted revolutions and liberation were first victims. And they didn't have time to heal from all their wounds before they could start fighting. But they led the people to liberation. And that's how we need to look at these family members. This is exactly what's going on. Not only are they not helpless, they're the only ones who can truly help the situation.
And these are the stories that aren't being told. And I would like to start with you, Petra. Will you share your experience related to police brutality and your family member, and just kind of start from the beginning maybe, and just fill in the blanks. Tell us about your story.
So the start of what we did is, or what happened to us is, I woke up with a message from a friend, and it was a video. And so I started watching it, and then I was like kind of in a shock because I couldn't figure out what I was seeing. So then I sent it to my sons, and then my son started tracing it. And because in the video it looked like my husband, but I wasn't sure. And so we started tracing the story, and it just kind of was happening so fast that, you know, and I don't know how long it was, but my mind was so like discombobbled, like trying to comprehend everything that I was starting to read, and, you know, and my kids were trying to help find it. And by the way, Rex and I had 9 children. So, you know, this was a lot of people to deal with on top of everything else. And so we were all kind of experiencing this just like a high level of stress, I guess I would call it. And what ended up happening is one of my sons said, "Mom, it says that the person was executed." And just those words alone were just like, because we didn't really know what, but it just like the word executed, it just like felt like somebody was pouring hot lava. And so then we began to search for more to find out if it was truly there, you know, if it was truly him. And when I finally found out what all had transpired by watching videos, and by this time my kids are falling apart, and really everything was falling apart. Like the whole world just kind of like just seemed like it was in a haze. And so I didn't know what to do. I had a few people I called, and they came over to help support because I was trying to manage everything, and then I had my kids all you know, in an uproar. So finally I got a hold of the coroner's office, and I told him, because he was a John Doe apparently, and so I said, I think you might have, that might have been my husband, and I want to know if these tattoos match. So I explained the tattoos, and initially they told me no. So then from there, I was kind of like, oh, okay. But then she came back and she said, oh, wait, I'm sorry, because I had told her, I said, well, he's a Native American man, but he looks Mexican. I said, he has a mustache and and he has these tattoos, but they had classified him Asian. So when she went and looked, she didn't see, I think she was looking for a race. And she came back, she says, oh no, I'm sorry, they match. Which one of the tattoos had my son Mario's name on. So then I went into, I don't know what kind of gear, but that gear was just like, let me do this, let me find this, I need to find all I can out. And in the meantime, I'd say probably within 15 minutes of my call, the police department showed up. And I honestly, you know, it was just like, it was so like having them show up so quick. And nobody there in my household or any of the people I had supporting us had ever had any experience with this. So they just kept telling me, be honest with them. Just be honest, just be honest. And I didn't really know even why they were saying this. You know, it was just like in my head, like, why are you telling me this? I don't know what we're talking about. And, you know, it was just like, I don't know. It was just this, like, I don't know, you have no more footing all of a sudden. You just feel like, you know, you're just trying to function for a moment to make sure you understand clearly what's happening. And, you know, and they proceeded to ask a ton of questions and then they left. They told me they'd be in contact with me, never did get in oh, they did call me to tell me to watch the TV. And, which, I had no idea what that was. You know, I didn't know what they were talking about. And so they contacted me for that. And from that point forward, it was just like, you know, it's just like the amount of emotion you're going through, the amount of emotion you're trying to handle from your family. You're trying to be supportive. You're trying to do all these things, but the whole time, all you're thinking about is, did I just hear this person's been murdered, and nobody's acknowledging it. They're all kind of just talking, you know, and then for myself, you know, my husband was accused of crimes, and so the dehumanization began also. But I didn't know what that was. I didn't understand because I had nobody who had the experience. So when they started calling him the Rogaine robber, and I was like, why are they doing that? You know, and nobody still explained dehumanization to me. It wasn't until I met Nissa that I began to understand these factors. And, you know, I was trying to hold my family. I had kids still in school. I had, you know, and I was trying to manage the school system because, you know, the first day it was released that it was Rex. You know, you're trying to navigate a lot of stuff, and one of those things that you're navigating is that people, when they believe that what the media is releasing, and they don't see you as like them as much anymore. All of a sudden, you are the family of this person, and this person deserved to die. This person was a piece of whatever. You know, all this stuff starts to come out onto social media. Have to cut everybody off of social media, but that's the only source we have. And immediately have to tackle the school. Have to tell them, you know, do not let my kids be mistreated. You know, luckily for me, I'm kind of a mama bear, so I was right in their face right away. And this is trying to maintain everything. And so, you know, when a family is impacted like that, you know, they're alone. Like, you have people around you, but you really don't. You know, you're just like, because it permeates everything all of a sudden, like every part of your being. And there's no recourse from it. There's nothing that can be said, done. You're just like, it's just there all the time. And, you know, you're just trying to be present, and you're still being, you're fearful of everything because, how you know, I was lucky on some parts. My community here in where we live came together, and they did, you know, they did help, but it starts to dissipate too, you know, and pretty soon you're alone again. And I think that the fact that when we talk about families, you know, because everybody's out there, everybody's talking, and, you know, and the message is being out there, but the last thing you want as a family is to see more destruction in the world, or, you know, like this. Even though I'm you know, I'm standing there and I'm supporting with Black Lives Matter, and I'm hurting for this family and for this man. I don't want to see other people be killed. You know, I wanted that for relief. It wouldn't have mattered to me, you know. to have the words and have his voice heard. That would have mattered to me, to hear, to hear people doing something in a way that it was impactful and peace and protest would have meant something to me. I didn't get that from my husband. Nobody came forth. Nobody spoke for him. To have that kind of platform, it's so important to me that, and I think to many of the families who have been impacted, is that it gets really used, that the voice is really, really heard, because it's an opportunity that not all of us got, and not all of us will have, so, I think, there's a lot of things people don't understand either. Like you all of a sudden are living in a different headspace. You can't remember, you can't remember like certain things. You don't even know that you're in a state of PTSD. You don't know, you're trying every day to crawl out of bed. You're trying every day. And, I can't imagine what his family's going through, right now. I know that I've heard that they have spoken, and I've heard that they've asked for it to be peaceful, for people to be peaceful, to say his name in a peaceful manner. And, to me, I think that's what we would all want. And I think there's a lot of impact in families coming together, because as sad as it is to say, there's so many of us. And that's the hard part, is that if you brought us all together, we would be a larger force, because there's so many of us. And, I'm grateful to Nissa, because Nissa helped me bring in everything that I was experiencing, and being able to move through it, and being able to move forward from it. And Oja, they brought us together as families, and I've met some people that, when it comes time, I have some really great friends who are support. But just even like people forget, even a phone call after a while, to say, how are you? And so to have additional support for families was really impactful to me, especially because even I think people all thought we were a large family. We would kind of be supportive to each other, but we were all in chaos. We were all experiencing this in chaos. We couldn't support each other, and there was no resources out there for us. I went to 4 or 5. Unfortunately, here I went to 4 or 5 different therapists, and I just always felt like they couldn't understand, and they didn't understand. They wanted me to treat me like I was just going through some type of experience that was just a temporary thing. But this is not temporary, and it will never be temporary. And there's more to my story in the back, where I feel like it kind of leads into some, like why I feel like it was hard to reach out. But I think the big thing for me too is knowing that my kids, I've been trying to get my kids to be participants, and so they could kind of grow too, because I feel like it's important because they have a different voice than I have. They have a different experience than I have. And, and I think that's another thing that I think of is like how many children are having to navigate through this, because sometimes as adults, we're navigating so much pain. We kind of forget that these kids need something too, and when you're impacted that way, it's not even in, it's hard to just do a simple daily thing, because you don't know when you're going to see another video. You don't know when somebody's going to say something. You don't know when, somebody reaching out to you is going to trigger something. And it's been 4 years and I still get triggered. I can finally hear a police siren without feeling like throwing up. And that was a long time. I can finally go past a police officer without having an anxiety attack. Because even immediately afterwards, I got stopped, and and they kind of said that they were investigating me for a hit and run, and that would just kind of caught me odd. And then Mario and Chandra, his wife, were with me, and it was funny because where we found our vehicle was in the police impound, and so, we were just kind of a little concerned that we were, because that's what this is what it puts in your head. Now you're in fear that you're in constant surveillance, so I don't, that's, the story doesn't end, but that's, I'm going to end it right there for now. But that's been my experience, and that's how, I really hope to see, I think we're doing something on Saturday, and I really believe that that's going to be probably one of the most impactful moments I'm going to experience in my life as I meet other families. So thank you.
Petra, there was something that you spoke about, and you talked about the dehumanization of the victim, and how that's one of the techniques that governments and the media use to promote their agenda. And I wish that people could just take a second to put themselves in the shoes of someone like you, experiencing something like that, because we have these situations that come up. There's all this hoopla about it for its time, and then people forget about it, not recognizing. And that's why I was so happy that said that she wanted to bring on families who had experienced this, because what I want to do here is I want people to get in touch with the humanity. The opposite of the dehumanity is what I want this broadcast to be all about. And what you just talked about, there needs to be so much more of that done. And that's one of the wonderful things about this new media that exists, is that it allows us to be able to create our own media and share stories the way that we want to share them, which is the way that they actually happen, right? Not reshaped by someone else's agenda. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I have nothing but empathy for your journey that you're still going on. And I hope that you get some type of resolution. I know time heals all wounds. I know it's already been 4 years, and that the sting is probably not much different than it was when it first happened. But to hear you say that you're looking towards resolution with all this, whatever that means, with a situation like what you've gone through, I just pray that you keep working your way there.
Thank you.
And so Mario is your son.
Mario's my son. Yeah.
Okay. So Mario, your dad was murdered. What is your perspective on all this? Tell me your story.
Well, I was living in Oregon at the time, and I found out just how my mom did. We found out through social media. They didn't release his name until about like a few days after the events happened. And basically what we had to do was our own research. We had to kind of see what the news was saying, kind of see what people's on social media were saying about about what happened with my dad. There was a lot of people when it was happening listening to the police scanners at the time. So we're kind of being able to, gather a lot of information that way. And then when we did find out the facts, just like my mom said, the media dehumanized my dad. They said they found out everything they could in a way to kind of incriminate him. And that's kind of what we're left as families who are affected. We're left with them kind of just destroying their character and creating this legacy that's left behind that's not at all what our loved ones are. And so that's where we're left, is having to tell the truth, having to tell their story and our own story in this. And it was just it's just most devastating, most traumatic thing I've ever experienced, and I wouldn't wish end that on anybody. And but beyond that, it's also become like a public health issue, because us families have had to deal with so much trauma, so much stress, then we have nowhere to turn. So I know for me, it's been difficult. It's been difficult even for me to kind of talk about my dad. This is pretty much the first time I've spoken, and it's been about 4 years since he was murdered by the police. Because you just left in a lonely place. You're left in a place where you don't know who to trust. You're left with public perception of that it's just become so misconstrued. So my heart goes out to any families who've been affected, and I hope we can reach a place where everything changes. It's been awful.
Well, I appreciate you having the courage to step up and do this. Obviously, as you mentioned before, this isn't something that you do very often. So I want you to know how much I appreciate your bravery in being able to talk about this, both of you. And so for the Force Trajectory Project, your mission in terms of being able to change things is what? Which one of you would like to talk to us about that? Nissa?
So, our original intent has kind of led the way, which is to put a lens on the experience of the aftermath of police violence, right? I mean, there's so much, and it's multi-layered. There's so much to unpack. There's the trauma that families receive. It's long-term trauma. It's not something, we've worked with families who have, been fighting for 24 years. And they'll tell you straight up that the pain never goes away. In fact, sometimes it gets worse. And so our goal right now and where we are right now is kind of like a bridge builder. And that's always been is to bring community to a space of deep listening, so that families can share the burden, so to speak, because a lot of these families, the national cases is like, we are basically being manipulated by the media, which is run by capitalism. I mean, if it bleeds, it leads, right? So these cases that get a lot of attention because of how sensational, how much potential for sensationalism known, right? And so then everybody flocks to support that family, which, of course, we want to support that family. You know what I'm saying? The last time it was like maybe the second day after Mr. Floyd was murdered that I checked the GoFundMe and $500,000 had been raised.
Yeah.
But we have to understand as a public that law enforcement kills people at a very high rate. We're talking about 3 to 5 people nationwide every day, which is around
1,500.
1,000 to 1,500 people that we know of. Okay, let's just say that we know of 1,000 to 1,500 people per year. And then you think about all the families that they have and that people that love them, friends to communities, how many people are impacted by that? That's a devastating impact.
Can I say something about this real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So about the numbers, I just want to interject about the numbers. I want people to put this in perspective. All right. So when we talk about the Jewish Holocaust, right? People say 6 million people. And we talk about the African Holocaust, the transatlantic slave trade. That's anywhere from 50 to 100 million people. But they banned, right? So after the emancipation, they were still going on, and those numbers aren't in the equation. Similarly, when you look at history and we talk about genocide to lay the foundation of this country in the continents of America, right? When we talk about the Caribbean, you talk about Haiti, and you talk about when they're talking about the total annihilation of indigenous people. That's based on European census. It's not the truth. So when we look at the numbers, when we say 1,500 people a year, that's lowballing it really hard, because the fact is that even though in the 1994 crime bill, it was built in that they were supposed to keep track of incidences of police murder, the excuse for not doing so was that they ran out of funds, right? And police stations across the nation, police forces across the nation, they don't keep numbers. So these numbers are independent numbers. That means it's grossly low because there's so many that go under the radar. So we have to keep it in perspective in terms of the numbers. I just wanted to interject with that to let people know that even the number 1,500 a year is crazy low. It's probably double that.
Right.
All right. So yeah, that's all I really want to say about that.
So I'm glad that he brought that up, because we got to pay attention to, you know, right now across the country, the police kneeling all of a sudden, you know, hugging protesters and entire departments showing solidarity. And I'm sorry, that's for show. That's a PR move, okay? And the reason why I'm saying that is because for the families that have suffered at the hands of those local departments, that's the question, all right? Because I can guarantee you that department has done the same thing that the Minneapolis police have done to George Floyd, right? The same thing. Eric Garner, all the nationally known cases, we know that NYPD is a murderous department. We know that LVMPD is a murderous department. And go to the explaining the multi-layers of all of this and how some nationally known cases get all this support. The cases like, for example, Rex Wilson, he was immediately media. So that family never received any support. Okay, so imagine your loved one being killed and then they're immediately criminalized. You're dealing with the trauma of losing that person in a violent manner. And then you're dealing with media that's just like, well, it's good that this person's gone. The police are doing. And so our goal is to combat and resist being manipulated by the capitalist media and the lies of these police, and allow families to reclaim the narratives of their loved ones. So, you know, we also work in the prison justice community. You know, we've been working on trying to free people out of jails and prisons in regards to COVID. And one thing that I've learned from that movement is that the person is incarcerated, right? And so when people want to help free people out of jail and prisons, the family becomes the conduit to that person inside. That's right? And so those activists and advocates working on that social issue know that they have to go to the family and have have good rapport with them so that they can communicate with that person that they're trying to free. Right. Well, that's not the case in police brutality, because that person is gone. Right. And so and people are reacting, and we as a movement have been reacting to the killings, which is obviously we need to emote, right? Young people, all kinds of people, we need to have an emotional outlet. It's valid. But the problem is that, you know, usually it goes away after a few months, after a year, whatever. When people get tired of protesting every day, people go back inside, they go back home, they go back to their jobs, and they forget. They forget that it's happening every day. They forget it. They think about the nationally known cases, but they don't remember. They don't know anybody in their zip code that are experiencing this. And so our role in this work is as a connector, as education, connecting community to impacted folks, allowing impacted folks to receive the appropriate community response to this of absolute atrocious violence. So I don't want to take any more time. That's what I want to say.
Well, you were touching on something a second ago, Nissa, about how the news cycle, basically, because the media has so much of an impact on all of our lives in this country, and how news cycles switch very quickly. So once the news cycles start to shift, stories get lost. So the question I have for you is, what can we as a community do to keep a front of mind awareness within our communities beyond whatever stories the media are telling or the sensationalism that you're talking about? How can we at a grassroots level, both of you, in your opinion, keep this as something that has a front of mind awareness? Because when things have a consistent front of mind awareness, that tends to be where the change comes from. I'm almost 50 years old, so I've been on the planet a while, and it seems that things that are emphasized consistently, where there's a front of mind awareness about that thing, those are the things that tend to get changed. What can we do to keep this something that's focused on beyond the hoopla of the media? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, the first place to start, and I agree with you in terms of like it's the change of the mind, right? It's awareness that when we become aware, we are all of a sudden our intention shifts, right? And so I think the first answer to that has to be understanding that we have to be in service of those who are directly impacted, and we need to start locally. Okay, we can have as many solidarity protests for George Floyd. That's not necessarily going to impact things locally, and that's not going to necessarily really impact how the case is run through, right? Whether or not that family receives justice, so to speak, right? So we need to shift our focus to local cases. And that research. You know, the reason we found the Rex Wilson family is because I have my fitness trainers. They do kickboxing and things like that. They knew Mario, and they were like, they knew the work that I did, and they said, hey, we know a family that just lost their loved one. Can we connect you? And that's the way we found them. Now, another way to find locally impacted families is to go through the news and pay attention to officer-involved shootings, right? We need to understand that the only truth that we can be certain of when we hear about police killings in the news is that that person is dead. That's what we can rely on. That person is dead. The rest of the narrative, we can't trust that. Now, am I saying that there are instances where someone is committing a crime and is actually threatening the life of an officer, pointing a gun at them, and then the officer defending his life for real and is shooting, and that might be considered a justified shooting or whatever? We're not saying that that doesn't exist. That does, but I'm going to tell you right now, after doing this for over a decade, it's a very, 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 very extremely small percentage, and I mean like very, very small, like 1-2%, and I stand firm on that, because what we have, I've looked at is where the person is like it's just the same as the Rex Wilson case, you know? It's like they basically stole his life, put up a narrative that they control in the media. The media puts it because they believe and trust the police authority. And then this family is suffering and nobody knows about it. And in fact, because it's spread out in the media, the rest of the community doesn't want anything to do with this, right? And they're isolated. So what we need to do as a community is we need to pay attention to local cases. If whatever zip code that you're living in, there might be active families already. Connect with them. Ask them how you can serve them. And that's out there, because I know Oja has a couple of words to say about this as well.
Yeah, I want to agree with my partner wholly and completely, and I just want to talk about the other side of what you're talking about, right? So when you're saying, what do we do to keep it on our mind as the messages are changing and the attention span is so low, simultaneously as we're dealing with rehumanizing folks who have been dehumanized and restoring the idea of human rights, right? Collectively, everybody. On the other side of the equation, we also pay attention to how the public is programmed, right? So many times, like I told you, my friend, the article that came out is different in every case, is that they tried to find a way to criminalize him based on the pervading ideas that have been disseminated through mass media. That is to say, the racist stereotypes that birthed Hollywood. You know what I mean? For example, the notion that, you know, basically anytime you tell somebody somebody's been killed by the police, the thing they ask you is, oh, what'd they do? Right? Where does that come from? The thing about where that comes from. Where that comes from is every time you turn on the TV, you see another person, probably a black person, getting perp walked. That means with their hands behind their back, getting in the car. That shows you, that creates a mass consent, what Noam Chomsky, the great scholar from MIT, calls manufactured consent. Or in the world of media consumption, it's called perceptual priming, right? So priming the public to think that indigenous folks are all vagrant, that black folks are all criminals, you know, that any woman that stands up for herself is a bitch. You know what I mean? All of these things that we accept unknowingly sometimes that we're inundated with, we break that stuff down through the dialectic. We have a conversation about it. So I want to say that, like, that's the other side of the equation. One side of the equation is the sensationalism of the media. If it bleeds, it leads. That's an unspoken terminology. Nissa mentioned that. The dehumanization piece happens because that's not really new. That only translated over to media and legislation from the act of colonization. It's always been about blaming the victim. Back in the day, they used to try to say that indigenous people were less than human and uncivilized. The word civilized contains the word civil, which means peaceful. And if you look at Columbus's journal, the indigenous people that he encountered were the most peaceful human beings he's ever seen in his life. All right. So to call somebody uncivilized, that is the most peaceful civilization that you know, which exists in a mind state of abundance, that's trying to share resources with you when you come from a place in Europe, which is totally scarce, which has been at war for generations in these 100-year wars. The perception is different, right? So the ideology, the original ideology, which is to say what most people would call white supremacist ideology. We like to try to change the terminology and say false white supremacist, because there's nothing supreme about the invention of a white race or whiteness, and there never will be. We're not minorities. If we take all the people of color and put them together, who's the minority on the planet, right? We can't, there's nothing minor about what's going on here, right? So we got to be careful about the words we use. But I would say that it's the attention on both sides of that at the same time, and trying to do whatever we can with what we have, like our ancestors have, to conduct this resistance. Like whatever you got, use it. It's just a guerrilla mentality. So we take that to media. And I would say, and to add to that, this right here, what you're doing is really the beginning of what people can do. Use your platform to give platform to family members. Employ deep listening. I'm watching you as you listen to us and as you listen to the family members, and I'm very pleased with what I see, because it takes a lot of people to get to that point that you're at, to not interrupt, especially as a show host, as a producer of a show, to sit there and to employ active listening. Key, we lead listening. I think a lot of activists, people that are beginning to politicize, they're too frantic, they're too spastic. They want to know, what can I do, what can I do, what can I do? Not understanding that involves a certain privilege to turn that off. Family members can't turn that off. That hypervigilance, that revolutionary spirit of having been directly affected by something is not something you can turn off. So the paradigm needs to be shifted. Folks need to listen and take direction from our true leaders, which are the folks that actually sit in that unwelcome club of to have lost people, who have had lives stolen according to state-sponsored terrorism,
There's one last thing that I want to add, which is to remind people that this is a protracted struggle. This is that comes from Grace Lee Boggs, yes, activist, rest in power, recently passed, 101 years old, Chinese American woman fighting for liberation for all people. This is a protracted struggle. This is not something that, it's like you rah for a few weeks or a few months even, and justice is won. Cases, the criminal legal system that supposedly is the gatekeeper of justice, right, which we really haven't seen at all, because it's a white supremacist system. Let's just be real about that. False white supremacist system. They put families through this crazy intense waiting period, and then on top of that, lawyers are, a lot of these lawyers don't really have the interest of the family in mind, and so the problem is that, we need community to be engaged on a daily basis, literally. So for example, Rex Wilson's case, there was never an indictment. He was immediately criminalized. But there's no criminal case. It's done, right? But they do have a civil rights case pending. And so then it becomes an opportunity for community to engage. How can we get justice for Rex Wilson? And that would involve being, first of all, going to the family and being like, how can we help? How can we raise Rex's name up? How can we help advertise the fact that this happened to this indigenous person who is no longer a part of our community, who was a Golden Gloves boxer, who was a U.S. Marine and served this country, right? Who was a successful businessman, the father of 9 young Native American children who belong on this land. This is their land. We're on stolen land right now.
Right.
How can we serve this family to uplift Rex Wilson and get justice for him? So yeah, in regards to that, that's what I wanted to say in regards to how can community support.
But I would love for you to ask that question to both of our family members right now also, because you know we're really just trying to set the playing field for them to come in and for people to be receptive. So I would love if we could let folks answer this question.
Take it away, Petra.
I was going to have you pass it to Mario first. I think this word keeps coming up of justice, and I think that it's actually really hard to define the word justice, because there's so many aspects to what someone considers justice. And I think when it comes to impacted families, I think one of them is that that there's resource and support available to them, just the same as there would be resource and support to anybody who comes from a murdered individual, because the community doesn't have anything there. There's no national like clearinghouse or anything national where you can say, hey, I need referral to referral for help for this because this is how I've been impacted in my family. There's nothing locally. There's the police forces. I've been on different panels where they spoke and they've asked what could they do, and they write things down and they hear what we're saying and then nothing. There's just never anything. I think also like taking a look at reforming, reformation in how police are being trained, and of course we all agree with that one. But I also think there's like things like age limits that get overlooked. I think there's a lot of like, what is there, anytime there's a cop shooting, one of the things that I often see is that this cop's been in repetitive shootings, repetitive brutality issues. Where is the how are they doing this? How are they ending up back on the streets? Because obviously, they're going to have some type of issues mentally themselves. I find it very hard to believe they can continue to do that and not have something going on in the brain. But and then I think like for our own case would be to actually have them acknowledge that they did violate his civil rights. Personally, I'd like to see reform on a legislative level as well. I attended one, and it kind of feels like a waste of time when you're sitting there, and you're listening to legislators. Like everybody's talking, everybody's saying anything. We had a ton of impacted members talking, and then it was kind of like they just turned, and it was almost like the whole time we spent there didn't exist as they began to speak. And it's like deaf ears, and those are the reasons why it's important to vote, because we need people in office who can understand that this is an issue and are willing to step up and take the challenge. Because the people currently in office, the minute you say the word police brutality, they run away from you. They don't want to hear it. And there's some in Nevada, on the judges panel, there's a few of them that I think are going to be very important to place. And I'm grateful that they're there and they're willing to speak up, because it's time that it happens. It's kind of a very good old boys club out here. Everybody knows everybody, and the feeling of that you'll ever get justice is just not there. So to me, it would be, having all those items addressed, and I just even myself, creating these types of groups that are support systems, I think even that is helpful in the form of justice, because that word just doesn't exist in your head. It's very hard to form a meaning behind it. So, but thank you.
Mario, do you have anything to add?
I would just say I agree with my mom, and that there definitely needs to be more police accountability. It's become so political with these murders, and as Indigenous folks, we believe that all life is sacred, and it's almost like nobody is seeing that. Everybody's creating this narrative of justifying this death, and it's just nobody can see it for what it is, and that's that lives are being taken. And so for me, it would be to really, I don't know what that would look like, whether what the entity would be, but something there to really look at things subjectively and justly, and just hold our police and our processes and justice system just more accountable.
And also, I'd like to say one more thing, and that's that, this doesn't just impact, like, I hear a lot of people talking about it being like just focused on race a lot, and I think that what we're not realizing is we're all human, and that it impacts all of us. Obviously, the world is hurting, and the world has been coming forth. I've been watching protests all over the world, and and to me that was just very, very cathartic in a way, to see how many people from any and everywhere, know that the people coming together weren't just focused. They realized this is about human beings, and that I hope that when there is pain there and people see the impact of families, that they can embrace everybody and not feel like, not leave somebody to the sideline just because they don't fit what's in their brain, or fit how they think, or their patterns, because we're all, right now, I think we're all hurting. And I can say that after last night, and I heard, I'm hearing people being killed, cops and protesters, and knowing that my kids want to be participants, and it's been trying. It's been extremely trying, and I hope that we can eventually all embrace that we're all living on the same earth, and we're all living in the same world, and we're all living in the same cities, and that it's time to really have that paradigm shift.
And it really is, right back to the point that we had made earlier about it's really all about humanity when it comes down to it. And from my perspective is I want to kind of share the importance of not allowing ourselves to be seduced by a system that is designed to keep you seduced and distracted from the true work that needs to be done, and that is being done by people like the Forced Trajectory Project, as well as when you have the families who've suffered from this type of tragedy, their stories are often not told. And so I would say for those of you who are probably watching this, you're probably looking for something more than is being offered from our traditional media, because again, as Nissa had said, news is a business. And so when you really want to understand something, you have to sometimes dig deeper. And it's listening to people who are really on the front lines and experiencing it, I think, that will give you the more of the connection with the humanity, that these are not just figures on a television screen. These are human lives that are being taken away. And and that's, again, one of the reasons why I wanted to create this broadcast. Petra and Mario, I really appreciate both of you for having the courage to come here and share a unbelievably painful experience with all of us. I hope that it was therapeutic in some way, as the two of you. I know, Petra, you had mentioned that you're getting some therapy from the work that you're doing talking about this. I hope that it helped you in that way. And for Nissa and Oja, you guys are your soldiers. So go back out there and be who you are. And I want you to know how much I appreciate what I've watched the two of you do to make humanity better through your efforts. And so thank you all for participating in this edition of the PR Connections radio show. And God bless you and keep you. And let's keep fighting the good fight, right? With peaceful ends in mind, by the way.
Guy, can I say something? I wanted just to make an announcement. Petra had mentioned earlier that Saturday we're planning something, and we haven't announced anything yet publicly. We're still working on organizing, but basically what's happening is impacted families are coming from other parts of the country to stand in solidarity with Las Vegas impacted families. We want to reestablish that they are the ones that are on the front line of this fight against police brutality. We are in alignment with Black Lives Matter, absolutely 100%. However, we have been hearing that families that are non-Black and even some Black families have been turned away to speak at protests, and that is not okay. That is not okay. So if you are an activist out there and you are organizing, please involve families. Don't tokenize them. Don't exploit them. They've been exploited enough. They've been used enough. They need to be part of the organizing, and frankly, they need to be centered, and they need to be part of the leadership of this movement. So, but stay up to date with our updates on the upcoming events that we have planned Friday and Saturday, and possibly even Sunday. It's going to be big. We need volunteers. We need donations to house, to pay for the hotel rooms and travel that these folks are needing. And we need food donations. We need all of that. So if you can help out, we are all over social media. Instagram is Force Trajectory. Facebook is Force Trajectory Project. Our website is forcetrajectory.com. Twitter is FTPRO for FTP Pro Media. And also, so stay up to date on that, and we will make an announcement shortly. Thank you.
Yeah, and so you guys know when it rolls out, what it's called is Families Are the Front Line. Families are the front line. Guy, if you have contacts in the community that are particularly concerned with the issue, that want to help out, by all means, please reach out to us. And then yourself, if you want to have a conversation, we're definitely open. We thank you so much for putting this together and giving families a platform. You know what I mean? Don't stop. Keep on.
Oh, absolutely. This is something that is very, very much needed to be done. Everything happens in its time, and this is the time. We've got the new media, and that's what this network is all about. PRConnectionsRadio.com is the new media. It is about telling stories the way that we want to tell them. So thanks everyone for tuning in to the PR Connections Radio show, and stay tuned for more broadcasts at PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. Take care of yourself.